Look, man, I know we're friends, but the price is non-negotiable. It's $1 a wipe. Take it or leave it. Ugh. What? Unless you've been living in a doomsday bunker for the past year, which, let's face it, some of you may have, you'd know that the world has been gripped by a new pandemic, an unstoppable strain of mass hysteria. But this isn't the first time that consumer cattle have been led astray by such crazy ideas to spending their life savings on their 5th roll of toilet paper. So, let's take a look back in history at some of America's most finest moments of mob mentality and mass hysteria.
On December 7, 1941, just before 8 o'clock a.m. on the Sunday morning, hundreds of Japanese fighter planes descended on Pearl Harbor, a U.S. naval base near Honolulu, Hawaii, where they managed to destroy nearly 20 American naval vessels, such as 8 battleships and over 300 airplanes. More than 2,400 Americans died in the attack, including civilians, with another 1,000 wounded. It was on this day after the assault that President Franklin D. Roosevelt asked Congress to declare war on Japan. While the attack on Pearl Harbor had been a surprise, Japan and the United States had been edging towards war for decades. The U.S. was very unhappy with Japan's increasingly hostile attitudes toward China. The Japanese government believed that the only way to solve its economic problems was to expand into the neighbor's territory and take over their market. As such, the U.S. Army joined the Allies against the Axis and took another win for the USA. However, this time also led to some disastrous downsides, such as the internment camps made to punish Japanese citizens for no reason at all. Japanese internment camps were established during World War II by President Franklin Roosevelt through his Executive Order 9066. From 1942 to 1945, it was the policy of the U.S. government that the people of Japanese descent would be interred in isolated camps. Enacted in reaction to Pearl Harbor and the ensuing war, the Japanese internment camps are now considered to be one of the most atrocious violations of American civil rights in the 20th century. Executive Order 9066 affected the lives of about 117,000 people, the majority of whom were American citizens. Canada also followed the act, relocating 21,000 of its Japanese residents from its west coast. Mexico also enacted its own version, and eventually 2,200 more people of Japanese descent were removed from Peru, Brazil, Chile, and Argentina to the United States. The citizens were treated inhumanely. Family apartments were typically single 20 by 24 foot rooms with external bathrooms, showers, and laundry shared by a larger group. These rooms had little insulation, minus the wood stoves that they used in cold weather, and poor ventilation in the heat. In such close quarters, diseases like typhoid, dysentery, and smallpox spread very quickly over the camp and forced understaffed and undersupplied medical centers to put most of their resources towards vaccinations. High incidence of food poisoning and other illnesses also contributed toward the unsanitary conditions in shared bathroom facilities. Though families attempted to cope with their situation, after their release, when they later were surveyed about their experiences, living conditions was the #1 response to the question asking what the most difficult part of the experience was. This example of mass mob mentality led to the ruination of over 150,000 people's lives, treating them like prisoners for almost 5 years. The government finally realized that their crazy ideas regarding their own citizens was improbable, and the last Japanese internment camp closed in March of 1946, where President Gerald Ford officially repealed Executive Order 9066 in 1976. And in 1988, Congress issued a formal apology and passed the Civil Liberties Act, which awarded $20,000 each to over 80,000 Japanese Americans as reparations for their treatment. This is very comparable to the treatment of suspected witches in The Crucible. With nearly no evidence other than Abigail's testimonies and fabricated stories, the entire town is so quick to suspect that anyone who is even thought of to be a witch, due to mundane stories like dying livestock, could be a witch, which is very comparable to the U.S. government's reasoning for these camps. A big difference is that Salem, however, never apologized for the trials or issued reparations. They only stopped after their higher elders were accused of witchcraft.
Well, folks, it seems that today is the beginning of the end. As if you'll check your calendars, you'll see that it has been exactly 1 year since the last reported case of the COVID-19 anywhere in the world, making the globe officially COVID-free. This is a remarkable achievement for mankind, and here's to hoping that 2022 is even better. But first, let's take a look at some of the highlights of the craziness that went down in 2020. While the first recorded case of COVID was in Wuhan, China in January 12th, it wasn't until around March when the United States and other countries felt the impact of the COVID virus, with many people choosing to stay home and perform their work and education from home, using services like Zoom and Google Meet to attend any gatherings. Soon after, the implementation of things like face masks and face shields led people to begin to go out feeling somewhat safe. During this time, however, the mass paranoia from conspiracy theorists spread like wildfire, leading people to believe that toilet paper was going to run out, causing people to spread in mass groups to flood their local supermarkets, buying out all of their stock for their homemade COVID bunkers. Now, this shift in demand was too fast for the supply to keep up, leading to a shortage of toilet paper, which caused the public to grow even wilder after the toilet paper. Unbelievable. Other products like Clorox wipes, gloves, and paper towels also followed the same trend. Another rumor regarding 5G cell towers promoted sicknesses such as the coronavirus were spread due to the faster speed that 5G promises, requiring more towers to be built and maintain a closer proximity to users. These facts had people believing that common illnesses like headaches were due to a prolonged exposure to a 5G tower near you, leading groups of people to begin destroying the towers. In fact, I think we have a clip. Let's roll it.
Cell tower workers already have a pretty scary job. They climb hundreds of feet into the air, all to make sure that our cell phones can work.
But a local crew says a woman made the job a lot scarier by shooting at them. Channel 9's Dave Faraday is live tonight in Alexander County. And Dave, walk us through what they say happened here.
Well, sheriff deputies are telling us, Scott, that the home where the shots were fired were right across the street. If you look behind me, you can see the cell phone tower right here. Earlier, we found out that there were 2 workers up on the tower when the shots rang out. A 3rd worker on the ground ran up into this area, and that's where he called for help.
This madness and chaos matches a lot of the values of the kind of acting before thinking mindset that a lot of people in the Crucible showed, jumping to illogical conclusions without even thinking for a second. One example of this is when Mr. Walcott accuses Martha of witchcraft after he believes that his pigs were cursed. Walcott bought a pig 5 years ago from Martha, and after it died, he went to Martha and demanded a refund. Now, naturally, she denies this refund, telling him that if he doesn't feed the pigs, they won't live, which he had told her that he hadn't been doing. After this, however, Walcott notices that his pigs won't live past 4 weeks, and goes to the council and demands that Martha must be a witch off this. Absolutely crazy, if you ask me. Anyway, that's all the time we have, folks. Now on to George Parks with sports.
Welcome to the National Broadcasting Company's History Night, where we take a look at history's recent events. Tonight's look, the Red Scare, and its impacts on Americans everywhere. During the early ages of the Cold War in the early 1950s, American officials repeatedly told the public that they should be fearful of the subversive communist influence in their lives. Communists can be lurking anywhere, using their positions as school teachers, college professors, labor organists, artists, or journalists to aid the program of world communist domination. This paranoia about the internal communist threat, what we call the Red Scare, reached its peak between 1950 and 1954, after Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin launched his series of highly publicized probes into the alleged communist invasion of the state, the White House, the Treasury, and even the U.S. Army. During President Eisenhower's first 2 years in office, McCarthy's shrieking denunciations and fear-mongering created a climate of fear and suspicion across the country. No one dared tangle with McCarthy for fear of being labeled disloyal. It was friend against friend, neighbor against neighbor. Anyone could ruin anyone's life with the simple allegation that someone was a communist, which created a period of unrest and chaos that baffles many today as to how officials let McCarthy's claims go so far, even resulting to the writing of the popular play, The Crucible, in which Arthur Miller writes about a period of time very similar to what he was facing today, which came to him after making the connection with his current life and the Salem witch trials. Americans also felt the effects of the Red Scare on a personal level, and thousands of alleged communist sympathizers saw their lives disrupted. While a small number of the accused may have been aspiring revolutionaries, most others were simply the victims of false allegations, and had done nothing more than exercise their democratic right to join a political party. The accused would be blacklisted, where they were essentially shunned and would be fired from their job and become a social outcast, which matches the Crucible's treatment of those accused of witchcraft, deemed a social pariah and avoided from shunning from society until their witchcraft execution. Though the climate of fear and repression began to ease in the late 1950s, the Red Scare has continued to influence the political debates in the decades since. It is often cited as an example of how unfounded fears can compromise civil liberties, and it's important that everyone knows about it today.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.